Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to the first online Zoom session of the 2025 season. This is called Notes from the Score, a festival preview. And basically, we are here tonight to talk about the musical offerings that are on next weekend. The festival already starts in just over a week's time. And I thought it would be nice to just share a little preview of the flavor of pieces and repertoire and artists that we're going to hear. Joining me today is our guest speaker, William Ruff. He has been music writer for the Nottingham Post for the last 32 years. And he reckons he's reviewed over 2,000 concerts in his career. So he's written a lot about music. He's done a lot of pre-concert talks and lectures, and it's a real pleasure to have him here as part of this discussion. And he also runs a really wonderful music group to which you're welcome to join after this session if you would like to continue spending some more time with William. So you can always contact me for that information. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce William and for him to say a little hello.
Well, hello, Carmen. It's really lovely to be with you all this evening. What a fantastic festival you've got. So much variety and so many things that we haven't had in the Nottingham Chamber Music Festival before. And indeed, lots of things I don't think we've had in Nottingham before. I certainly can't remember an evening of a concert of African pianism before. So we're in for lots of treats, I think.
Well, that's what it's all about. You know, we know there's a wonderful tradition of classical music and especially of chamber music, but it's always about pushing the boundaries of what we know and including more composers and more musical styles to the table. So the festival spirit is all about taking you down paths untrodden.
Excellent idea.
So the first event that I want to delve into and talk about is our opener. This is the 20th anniversary celebration of Delilah Fine Foods. So for those of you who don't know what Delilah Fine Foods is, it's a Nottingham institution. It's a food hall right in the center of Nottingham. And they have been very supportive over the years of having events, of having music in their space. It used to be a former banking hall. So it's a beautiful Victorian building that's been refitted. And now it's filled with all kinds of specialty foods. It's a deli. They have wine nights. They have cheese nights and various dinners. And we always thought it would be great because chamber music is so much appreciated with a glass of wine, for instance, that the pairing of those two makes it such a fun evening, especially for summer. And what I didn't realize was that this year was the 20th year that the business was operating. And I've become very good friends with the owner, Sangeeta, and she asked me to, let's think of a program that we can have that's a very celebratory event. And so we have come up with a program curated by the LePage Trio. This is run by the violinist David LePage, and he is putting together a very virtuosic program of music for violin, cello, and accordion. And the whole point is to kind of recreate those 18th century cafe culture of Eastern Europe. And that's reflected in a lot of the repertoire that he's chosen.
Absolutely. I mean, as soon as I saw this playlist, it reminded me of holidays I've spent in Eastern Europe, indeed in Budapest, in those wonderfully ornate cafes they have. It also reminded me of going on a boat trip around the Danube Delta and being a captive audience for folk musicians who were playing all sorts of weird and wonderful things. This program is really a journey through Romany and Balkan folk music. We've got Ravel's Zigan, which was inspired by Hungarian Romany violin virtuosity. Ravel was absolutely in love with the extraordinary things that these folk violinists could perform. We've got Romanian folk music. We've got Brahms's Hungarian dances, and they're including Bulgarian folk tunes, such as the one called Busimis. And we've got Bartok's Rhapsody No. 1, and he drew on Transylvanian folk melodies. So certainly it's a concert which highlights the diversity of Eastern European traditions. Here's one of the tunes from that program. The one Busimis is the Bulgarian one. Just a little taste of that. As Carmen said, you won't hear it in that particular instrumental combination, but you'll hear it in a very spectacular form. In fact, you'll hear some amazing violin playing at Delilah's on that evening, because it's certainly, the playlist spotlights the violin's role as the voice of folk and Romany music, demanding dazzling technique. One very favorite piece, and I'm sure most of you have heard this before, is a piece by the Romanian composer Dinicu, and it's called in Romanian Cioccalia, which means the lark. The violin does all sorts of really spectacular things, all sorts of trills and harmonics and amazing things. This is just the way it begins. It's sort of like a violin equivalent of an acrobatic high wire act. And also the program makes this contrast between this sort of raw energy of folk music and the way in which classical composers used it. In Brahms's Hungarian dances, for instance, I mean, the music is very polished, yet Brahms retains that folk dance vigor. Brahms was another composer who loved Hungarian music, and he used its rhythms in pieces like the last movement of his violin concerto and his piano quintet. And these Hungarian dances, he collected on his travels and turned them into pieces, first of all for solo piano, then piano duet, and they became hugely popular. Here's one of the pieces that we played at Delilah's, No. 1. So if you love foot-tapping rhythms and spectacular virtuosity, you'll love this concert at Delilah's. Back to you, Carmen.
Thank you, William. Now, William, I'm going to ask if you can stop sharing your screen just for a minute so that I can, so that everyone can see us. And yes. The next concert that I'm going to talk about, again, if you stop share.
Yes.
Just press that. Brilliant. So I'm going to pin myself as well. But the wonderful thing that comes next is our concert of the Villiers Quartet, which admittedly I am a member of. So I am the violist of the Villiers Quartet, and it is wonderful to play with my colleagues here in Nottingham. I think the main reason why I enjoy it so much is that we are based in Nottingham and so tied to the local community here, especially when it comes to chamber music and leading chamber music. And we actually hold a very special event called the Play Along, which will take place in St. Mary's on Friday, July 11th. And we invite players to come and play through a string quartet with us. And this year it's going to be the Schubert Rosamund. And then later on in that evening is our actual concert. So we are playing 3 works, opening with Haydn Quartet in D major from his Opus 76 set, the late quartets of Haydn, really beautiful sunny piece. And we're also going to do Schubert's Rosamund Quartet. And then mixed in with that as part of the global theme is a piece by a Chinese-Canadian composer, Vivian Fung. And this is her string quartet number 1. And Vivian Fung is a really dynamic composer. She wrote this quartet very much influenced by sounds of Asia and Chinese instruments and Indonesian music. So it's a very folk tinged work that has a lot of really cool elements such as pizzicato. There's one movement that's entirely pizzicato. And yeah, it's a really funky kind of rhythmic piece, which adds to the contrast of Haydn and Schubert.
Excellent. I now have to share my screen again.
Yes, go ahead and share again. Back to the DJ, as it were.
Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Right. Good. Well, you've certainly chosen one of Haydn's very greatest quartets. I did a quick calculation. I think this was at least the 77th quartet that he composed. So he was really getting the hang of it by this stage. And he could do people expected him to do the unexpected. And so this is a wonderfully unpredictable piece. Its first movement is not what you'd expect. It has a fantastic slow movement and it has an exhilarating ending. In fact, it opens with a movement that isn't in the normal sort of 18th century sonata form. It's in fact an allegretto in variation form. It's lyrical, it's dance-like, it undergoes transformations that are typical, they show off Haydn's sense of humor. He's a bit tongue-in-cheek. And then there are unexpected shifts. There's a very dramatic shift to the minor key before it resolves itself in a very spirited coda. This is how it begins, as I say, with a very innocent little theme, ripe for variation.
Oh, can we hear? I don't think it's shared just yet, William. Try sharing one more time your Spotify screen.
Right.
That was my fault for asking you to turn it off. Does it say, there we are.
Oh, is that right?
Yes,
has that worked?
It's starting to, yes, there we go. Okay, now you're shared.
Let's go back to the beginning of that. This is the theme
to the Haydn.
To the Haydn. The slow movement is again wonderful. It stands right at the emotional core of this quartet. In fact, sometimes this quartet is nicknamed the Largo because its slow movement is so full of emotion, is so profound. It's sometimes been likened to one of his other great works, The Seven Last Words from the Cross. Oh, wow. It has a kind of transcendent, almost otherworldly character. Again, just a taste of the opening of the Largo. Magnificent. The minuet is surprising as well, lots of abrupt dynamic shifts. And the finale it bursts with sort of folk-inspired liveliness. It's almost sort of mimicking a village band. It's unpredictable. It's full of hesitations. It's almost like someone running up and playing a joke on somebody, and then running off again. This is how it starts. And this is how it ends. And after that, I probably couldn't get in the world of the string quartet. I'm not sure that you could get anything more different than the first string quartet by Vivian Fung. I noticed that on her Facebook page, she describes herself as a composer and a bubblegum chewer. I'm not totally sure what we're meant to make of that. Canadian, but as her name suggests, she has a multi-heritage background. She composed this quartet in 2003 as part of her exploration of ways to combine Western classical traditions with influences from her multicultural heritage. So you can expect to find a kind of amalgam of Southeast Asian music, folk traditions, and lots of very sort of experimental avant-garde techniques. So it's a sound world that is there are bits of it that are familiar, but I think probably more bits which sound very refreshingly original. Lots of musical traditions there, Chinese, say Indonesian, and it has this, as Carmen was saying, this very notable third movement, which is pizzicato throughout. It was the first piece to be written. In fact, it was a complete standalone piece, and it features sort of plucked string techniques that evoke the textures of Asian folk instruments. And she built the rest of the quartet around this piece. This is how it starts. The first movement of the piece is an animato. It's lively, syncopated, lots of flowing melodic lines. Then there's an interludium, second movement, which has again got folk melodies over shifting harmonies. Then comes that pizzicato movement, and then the finale is a perpetual motion. It's very much a virtuosic finale driven by really relentless quaver passages and a very explosive finale, explosive ending to the finale.
William, if
Yes.
I'm able to pipe in there,
yes,
it's really great to hear, for instance, that recording of the second movement, which I love so much. But what I also want to emphasize is that when you go see these pieces performed live,
yes,
it's also a really physical
Yes.
display. That's what you also get. I mean, the recording is fantastic, but obviously there's that layer of being in there in the room where it's almost a choreography that happens within the ensemble
Yes.
to play the music. And what else also is interesting to see the notes pass from one instrument to another. So yeah, to be seen when you're at the concert on July 11th.
You're absolutely right. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing that can take the place of being there. And as you say, seeing it as a multi-sensory experience. It's not just your ears that are engaged. It's your eyes, and you feel it as well, don't you?
Yes, absolutely.
So that's wonderful. So a really interesting piece, very interesting piece that I'm sure will be new to most of people coming along to hear it. Then that your concert, the Villiers concert, ends with Schubert's string quartet, the one called Rosamunde. I know this is a lovely, sort of cheerful summer evening, but I'm going to change the tone, I'm afraid, because this piece was composed when Schubert was as miserable as I think as a human being can possibly be. It was composed in 1824. He was going through a period of deep personal crisis. He was very unwell, and he was going to get more and more unwell. He says, at the same time he was writing this, in a letter to a friend, I feel as though I am the unhappiest, most miserable man on earth. Imagine a man whose health will never be regained and whose despair at the thought makes things increasingly worse. Imagine a man whose brightest hopes have come to nothing, to whom happiness in love and friendship offers nothing but the greatest pain. Every night when I go to sleep, I hope not to wake up again, and each morning serves only to renew yesterday's grief. Well, burdened with such appalling misery, a lot of humans would have given up. But Schubert takes those profound feelings and turns them into great art. But you can tell right at the beginning that this is a very emotionally turbulent piece. The quartet takes its name from the second movement, the Andante, which borrows a very serene theme from Schubert's incidental music for a play called Rosamunde. The melody was originally written for the entrance of the play's heroine, and its serenity is really in marked contrast to the overarching melancholy of this piece. This is the Rosamunde theme. Beautiful theme. Strangely, this was the only Schubert quartet that was actually published during his lifetime. And when it was published, eventually critics initially overlooked it, favouring the more dramatic Death and the Maiden quartet. But this quartet, the Rosamunde, is one of Schubert's very finest chamber pieces. And as I say, is a very poignant testimony to Schubert's ability to transform personal anguish into art. He takes this wonderful melody from a pre-existing work and weaves it into this deeply unified and deeply introspective masterpiece. Back to you, Carmen.
Oh, thank you so much, William. I mean, when I hear that letter written by Schubert, who knew he was so close to death, I'm always struck by how he was able to create such beauty in the midst of such a low point in his life. I think
Absolutely.
that's such a very unique process of his, I feel like.
Yes.
And his music, particularly these later quartets, the Rosamunda and Death and the Maiden, are tinged with that. They really reflect that quiet, stoic beauty, but
Yeah.
also this turmoil. And
Yeah.
something about that emotional drama is so unique to him, to his sound. So,
Yes.
I hope that in the beautiful surroundings of St. Mary's, it will be a very special experience.
I'm sure it will.
Well, moving on, we come to a very special concert that is taking place on July 12th, Saturday. This is the coffee concert that happens in the morning, or rather late morning. It's at 11 a.m. and it's at St. Peter's Church, which is right in the center of Nottingham. The great thing is that it's free. It's actually admission by donation, so whatever you can give is great. There's also coffee offered just before. But in this African pianism concert, we feature two artists, Rebecca Omordia and Musa Dembele. Rebecca is a pianist. She's a Romanian Nigerian pianist, but she's based in London. And she is a wonderful performer, and she has taken on the role of really showcasing classical music by African composers and also by composers from the African diaspora. And she's really uncovered a whole really rich world of repertoire written for piano. But not only that, she performs with singers. She performs with other ensembles and instrumentalists. And in this particular concert, she's chosen to perform with a kora and percussion player named Musa Djembele. And so this will be a very unique journey, I think, because it's a mixture of works for piano, but also more traditional works for piano and either kora or percussion or another instrument called the ngoni. And if you don't know what an ngoni or kora are, they are both they kind of, I wish I had a picture. I had one on my other device, but my other device blew up before this. But they kind of look like a really elongated maybe a banjo or lute. It's kind of a cross. It's this body which is a circle, and then emanating from it are the strings and the post that the strings stand on. And yeah, it's a really beautiful sound. Probably somewhere between a cross between a lute and a harp, a very, very calming sound. So those are some sounds that you can listen for next weekend.
Yes, I mean, the music really does span an enormous number of cultures and regions. You've got Christian Onyeji, is Ufi Igbo dance, which comes from Nigeria, or rather, rooted in Nigerian traditions. There are traditional Congo pieces, and there's Ayuba's Yoruba songs. So very much the concert celebrates and highlights the diversity and indeed the interconnectedness of the African musical heritage. We've also got Florence Price, from the United States, and her Fantaisie Nègre represents a very important African-American classical perspective. So continent, it's not just countries in Africa that are joined together in through this music, but also continents are bridged. Florence Price is a name that perhaps, I don't know, 7-8 years ago even was hardly known outside musical textbooks, but her music is now played and celebrated everywhere, really, having been performed several times at the Royal Concert Hall, for instance, in those years. The second thing I'd say about it is that it brings together not just countries and and cultures, but it brings together traditional and classical forms as well. I mean, several of the works that will be performed are a kind of synthesis of musical elements that come from Africa, together with structures that we associate with Western music. For instance, Bankole's variations for Little Ao, they reimagine traditional Yoruba themes through classical variation form. This is his variations for Little Ao, at least the way it begins. Fred Onwuaseke is another composer with diversity in his background. He was born in Ghana to Nigerian parents and now lives in the United States. His 24 studies in African rhythms systematically explores rhythmic patterns from Africa within music that was primarily meant for piano students, but the music is much more ambitious than that. Going back to Florence Price, her Fantaisie blends all sorts of elements together. I mean, Florence Price loved high romantic European music. She was an enormous fan of Dvorak, and if you've heard any of her symphonies, you can hear her love for Dvorak shining out throughout them. So her Fantaisie starts, in high romantic, fashion, with lots of very sort of splashy, virtuosic pianism, where we're here in the world of the great late 19th century piano virtuosos. But after we hear these cascades of notes, we then go into a tune that sounds exactly as if it's an African American spiritual. And then later on in the Fantaisie, we have juba dances, and these juba dances feature prominently in her work. They're dances from the plantations where Black people were enslaved. They were dances accompanied by rhythmic hand clapping and the slapping of knees and thighs. Let me play you this very virtuosic opening and then a taste of the spiritual atmosphere of the second musical idea. Lovely melody. And the third thing I'll just say very briefly is that it brings together, music from the past with music from the present. I mean, there's a kind of dialogue between traditional African music with mid-20th century African and African-American classical pioneers, together with living composers. So this span across the ages very much demonstrates the enduring vitality of African musical traditions, and also the way in which they're continuously evolving through classical composition. And the inclusion of Florence Price's work further connects this African heritage with the way it's expressed in the diaspora. Back to you, Carmen.
Well, I think it's really beautiful to share the previews of this music, and as you are sharing on this Spotify list, some of the recordings that Rebecca has done are available for you to listen to. So we will share this list with you after the meeting, so you can explore more. And it's a real pleasure to bring this music to the festival, so that, you know, a lot of times when people hear them, they realize, oh my gosh, where has this music been? Why hasn't it come across my plate? And so this is the real chance to explore this. Yeah. So the melange of works throughout the weekend continues, and we next go to the concert that I also find very special. Chamber music of Louise Farenc and Franz Schubert, which is on the evening of Saturday, July 12th. This is very special because it pulls together a really beautiful group of musicians, of artists, and they will be playing a piano trio by Louise Farenc. I'm going to let William talk about her later on, and then Schubert's Trout Quintet. And I will also share with you that this concert will also include a duo for two violas by Giovanni Battista Viotti, who was an Italian 18th century virtuoso. So we've got to inject a little bit of viola love in there in that program. But we have fantastic artists. Cecily Ward used to be first violinist of the Cypress Quartet, which was based out in San Francisco. And she was there for over 20 years and has such a rich experience of quartet playing. Adam Romer is principal viola at the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra. So it's a real honor to have him here. We have Diane Clark, who is a double bassist with the Scottish Ensemble. And she, if you came to see the Scottish Ensemble last November, she was performing in that wonderful show featured by Mishmash Productions. Again, Rebecca Ormordia will be playing piano also. And then we have Claire O'Connell on cello, who many of you might have seen in past festivals because she's come before playing in various ensembles at St. Mary's. So a really beautiful group of musicians to get this chamber concert off the ground. Over to you, William, about the music.
Well, Louise Farenc, her name isn't at all well known these days, although interestingly, Sinfonia Viva included one of her symphonies at the Royal Concert Hall in the last 12 months. Although she's not well known perhaps these days, she was a celebrated 19th century composer. Unfortunately, though, her works were soon neglected after her death. She died in 1875. This particular piece, this trio, number 2, was composed in 1844. Shortly after her appointment as professor of piano at the Paris Conservatoire. And I think you could tell, if you didn't know anything about her, if you were just played this, anonymously, as it were, you would probably say that she was a fan of Beethoven and of Mendelssohn. It's, in terms of the form of the music, it's very much like Beethoven. In terms of the elegance, it's very like Mendelssohn, I think. This work has 3 movements, each one very balanced, lots of civilized dialogue, equally shared amongst the violin, cello, and the piano. The first movement has a slow introduction, which leads into a main part of the movement, which has a kind of feverish energy about it. This is how it begins. He was a virtuoso pianist, and you can tell that from this work. This piece was likely premiered at a private concert in her own home in 1845. It was praised at the time as a masterpiece of elegance. The piano part demands a lot of technical brilliance. It very much reflects her own virtuosity. She studied with two of the greatest pianists of the age, Hummel and Moscheles, and of course she taught piano at the Conservatoire. And the finale is a sort of blend of clarity. Again, she must have been, a great admirer of Mozart, together with romantic urgency. I'll just see if I can find just go to the end of the piece, just the last few moments of the finale. Wonderfully exciting ending.
I think she's such a firebrand of a composer, actually.
Absolutely.
And these, you mentioned earlier Florence Price, and we're also talking about Louise Farrenc. These pieces have been around, and it's about time that they're brought to the forefront. I'm really glad that more and more people are playing them on a more regular basis, because they're so amazing.
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that, in fact, it was although the trio was praised when it was first performed, it wasn't actually published until 8 years later, and perhaps that's symptomatic of the problems faced by not only by Louise Farrenc, by other female composers in what was a very male-dominated musical scene in 19th century Paris. But great to have it, resurrected in as part of this year's festival. Something altogether more familiar, of course. This concert will end with Schubert's great Trout Quintet, where he was, I hasten to add, he was in a much happier mood than he was when he wrote his Rosamunde quartet. It's named, of course, after the famous fourth movement, in which Schubert creates a delightful set of variations on one of his most popular songs. This is a translation of his song. In a limpid brook, the capricious trout in joyous haste darted by like an arrow. I stood on the bank in blissful peace, watching the lively fish swim in the clear brook. An angler with his rod stood on the bank, cold-bloodedly watching the fish's contortions. As long as the water is clear, I thought, he won't catch the trout with his rod. But at length the thief grew impatient. Cunningly he made the brook cloudy, and in an instant his rod quivered and the fish struggled on it. And I, my blood boiling, looked on at the cheated creature. Those are the words of one of his most famous songs. Here's the opening of it, sung by Dietrich Fischer-Dieskau.
In einem Bächlein hell, da schoss in froher Eil die launische Forelle vorüber wie ein Pfeil. Ich stand an dem Gestade und sah ihm süßer Ruh des muntern Fischleins Bade im klaren Bächlein zu, des muntern Fischleins Bade im klaren Bächlein zu.
Well, his quintet was composed, as I just mentioned, under very different circumstances from the Rosamunde quartet. It radiates youthful exuberance, flowing melodies, playful rhythms. It's written for an unusual combination. fact, the combination of instruments was specified by the patron who commissioned the work, one Sylvester Paumgartner. He was a very rich industrialist, and he admired Hummel's similar quintet, and he wanted it written for piano, violin, viola, cello, and double bass. Unusually, double bass, which adds this rich, resonant foundation, freeing the cello for more sort of melodic roles. But it certainly creates a very distinctive palette of sound. The variations begin the variations are the fourth movement. The theme of the variations starts on pianissimo strings alone. It's as if we're hearing it from a distance. Schubert captures the fast-flowing stream brilliantly in the third variation, as well as the shining scales of the trout. And by a wonderful stroke of inspiration, the darting sort of piano accompaniment, which in the song so vividly conjures up the wriggling of the elusive trout, is reserved for the final variation. It's a wonderful way in which he ends that movement. We know why the quintet was written, but there is in fact, unfortunately, no record of any performance in Schubert's lifetime. Nevertheless, it became a cornerstone of chamber music, beloved for its good tunes and inventive variations. And it certainly contrasts, its sunny mood certainly contrasts with Schubert's often darker works. And, we should celebrate it as something which, epitomizes this rare period of happiness in his all too short life.
Well, it's funny you say that. This is just a really strange side note, but I was at a wedding this last weekend out in Austria, and somebody was telling me about trout tickling, which is apparently a technique. I had to Google this, a technique where you can actually tickle the underbelly of a trout, and it supposedly goes into a trance-like state, and then catch the fish with your bare hands. Now, you might have to, check me on this, but apparently that's been around for a long time, and, we'll see. But it makes me think of a trout being tickled with this quintet.
I think you've got to bring a trout along with you to that concert and give a demonstration, Carmen.
Yes, perhaps. That will be a sight to see.
I think it would.
Well, we are coming to the end of our session, but not to the end of the events. I want to move on to a really special event called Tunnel Vision. Now, I do want to warn you that tickets for this are almost sold. So if you really do want to go online and get them now. This is a very unique concert taking part in the Park Tunnel, which is just outside the Park Estate. And we're going to have a string quartet, again led by David LePage, the LePage Ensemble. And they're going to perform a really eclectic program inside the tunnel. So it should be very nice on a summer's evening. Let's hope the weather is good. And this concert is also presented in partnership with the Nottingham Park Residents Association, because they were very keen on wanting to better the local biodiversity of the area and just cleaning up the area. I remember the tunnel because I used to live there, and I used to walk through it thinking, oh my goodness, this would be amazing for a concert because it's so different. At the time, there were lots of pigeons in the corner, and there was, animal and trash, rubbish on the floor. So it wasn't a very clean sight, unfortunately. But since then, apparently it's been cleaned up. New lighting has been put in. I mean, it's still an outdoor site. Don't get me wrong. This is not, a regular concert hall, but it's very unique in that it creates a particular atmosphere for music. So tunnel vision.
Again, I mean, as a child, I think I couldn't go into a tunnel without testing to see what it sounded like. And I think this music is going to just sound wonderful in those acoustics. But is there anything else linking these pieces together? Well, I did scratch my head. Well, first of all, we've got two composers that can be linked together. That's Philip Glass and Arvo Pärt. Philip Glass's company is a spare, rather hypnotic string quartet inspired by the works of Samuel Beckett. And Arvo Pärt's Summer is meditative. It's a setting of the credo using his technique, which he called tintinnabuli, that is, little bells. It's kind of a mixture of the sort of atmosphere that you create with church bells and ancient plain chant. I mean, both works, both the Glass and the Pärt, are intensely spiritual, and they achieve this sort of atmosphere of reverence through their precision and their apparent simplicity. Here's the beginning of Summer by Arvo Pärt, the Latin words of the Creed. I believe in one God, all-powerful Father, maker of heaven and earth. And I just ask you to imagine what this will sound like in the context of the Park Tunnel. The other thing about this concert is there are arrangements of music. So the concert bridges eras, lots of, I mean, there are 3, perhaps even 4 centuries of music on offer, and lots of different styles, lots of inventive adaptations. We're going to have an arrangement of Kraftwerk's Das Modell, which will be translating this sort of robotic coolness of the original into something else. Well, I can't wait to hear it, but I'm sure it'll maintain its sort of hypnotic simplicity, just to remind you of it.
4.
You certainly, no one could accuse you of not having a varied program of this festival, Carmen. We've got David Bowie, Heroes, again arranged by the LePage Ensemble. And we've got so much more as well. We've got J.S. Bach, we've got his 2-part Inventions, we've got an arrangement of the Toccata and Fugue, and then we've got one of music's most eccentric composers, Erik Satie, and his surreal Gnossienne No. 1. It defies conventions. It doesn't have bar lines. It has really weird directions in the score, like play from the edge of thought, or, and it says at another point, play like a waltz with a stumble. So it's sort of, it's kind of the discipline of the Baroque in Bach meeting sort of this experimental freedom. Again, I will really look forward to hearing Erik Satie in the context of the acoustic of the tunnel. Here's just a taste of his Gnossienne. What a wonderfully dreamy, surreal piece of music. So, to sum up, that concert will be a fascinating mix of styles and genres, and I'm sure that listeners will find their own connections across the centuries.
It certainly will be a genre blending concert.
It certainly will.
And what I do want to emphasize is that as it will be a string quartet, these will be arrangements of all the works as written for not in their original form. Some of them are in the original form, such as the Philip Glass Company, but a lot of them are going to be rearranged for quartet, so they'll have the flavor of it. But I also find that a lot of the arrangements that David LePage does are very beautiful and very appropriate. So we are coming to the end. I just want to also inform you about the other concerts that are happening. We have the wonderful production of Sinfonia Viva and Mishmash Productions on at 1 o'clock on July 12th. Now, obviously, this is it's a concert designed for kids. So to bring, because a lot of kids, it's very hard for them to sit through a full-length concert, but this is really designed for them. However, we often find with Mishmash Productions that these concerts are so engaging for adults as well. It's just a different way of seeing and hearing music because the musicians are so active and engaged. So I encourage you to come along to that one too if you happen to be in town. It's really great. And then we have the harp and Indian tabla duo Tala Tarang, who are performing at Nottingham Contemporary on Sunday, July 13th. And this concert is free. You can wander inside the gallery and you'll see them performing. And with all of that, there was a lot of repertoire. I know your head is probably exploding with all this, but in some ways, that's what a festival is supposed to do. We're supposed to make you think about music, absorb music, become one with the music, and just lose yourself. And I hope it will be a new era of discovery for you this year. Before we go, we might just have a few minutes. Does anyone have any questions they want to ask or anything they want to say? It's not necessary. The floor is open. No. Oh, Imogen is raising her hand. Unmute yourself, please, Imogen.
Okay, no, I just wanted to say thank you, Carmen and William. What a brilliant idea to give us a run through. It's been a lovely evening. Thank you both very much.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, it's mostly a taster. There's so much to go through, and I hope I know certainly that William's descriptions and background into music have really deepened my understanding of what will happen. Yeah. William, did you have any question?
No, I didn't think so. I mean, I think any questions I have will probably be resolved by actually going along to the concerts.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. We will be posting this online as well. So if you wanted to go back and listen again to any of the excerpts, we will send you the playlist too, so you can get the music in your head. And again, feel free to share this with your friends if you're having any people come along. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. What a lovely